Billionaire finds his ex at his mom's courtroom with 3 boys who have his eye color. The gavel hadn't even fallen when Thaddeus saw them. "You don't understand." The woman's voice trembled across the courtroom gallery. "I didn't keep them from you to hurt you. I kept them from you to save them." "Save them?" His voice cracked with 5 years of grief compressed into 2 words. "Bryony, they're my sons. They have my eyes. How long did you think you could hide in plain sight? As long as it took for you to become the man they deserved instead of the one I ran from." The bailiff's voice cut through the tension. "All rise." The Honorable Judge Cordelia Verne presiding. But Thaddeus Verne couldn't rise, couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Because 20 feet away, partially hidden behind a marble column in his mother's courtroom, sat 3 boys who looked like someone had reached into his childhood photos and pulled out living, breathing copies. And the woman holding their hands, trying desperately to become invisible, was the only person he'd ever truly loved. Before we dive into this story, I need to ask you something. Have you ever walked into a room and seen your entire past and future collide in a single moment? Have you ever realized that the biggest mistake of your life was staring back at you through the eyes of 3 children you never knew existed? Drop a comment below and tell me where you're watching from, because this story is going to take you on a journey through heartbreak, redemption, and the kind of love that refuses to die even when it should. If you're ready for a story that will make you believe in second chances, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next. The King County Superior Courthouse sat like a monument to justice in downtown Seattle, all glass and steel and the weight of 1,000 verdicts rendered within its walls. Rain fell against the windows in sheets because this was Seattle in November, and the weather seemed determined to match the gray mood of everyone forced to navigate its hallways, seeking resolution to their grievances. Thaddeus Verne stood in the back of courtroom 4C, hands shoved deep into the pockets of his charcoal Tom Ford suit, watching his mother work. At 32, he'd built a tech empire that had made him a billionaire before his 30th birthday. He'd been featured on magazine covers, interviewed on financial networks, called a visionary by people who mattered in industries that shaped the future. But watching Judge Cordelia Verne command her courtroom with quiet authority reminded him that all his success would never impress the one person whose opinion actually mattered to him. Cordelia was 63, silver-haired, sharp-eyed, and possessed of a moral compass that didn't bend for wealth, influence, or family connections. She'd raised Thaddeus alone after his father died when he was 7, working her way from public defender to district court judge through sheer competence and an unwavering commitment to fairness. She'd taught him that character wasn't built in moments of convenience, but in the hard choices nobody was watching you make. He'd disappointed her exactly once in his life, 5 years ago, and they'd never quite recovered. The morning docket was routine. A landlord-tenant dispute, a small claims case, a petition for a restraining order. Cordelia moved through each case with practiced efficiency, asking questions that cut to the heart of matters, making rulings that balanced law with humanity. Thaddeus had come because it was Thursday, and Thursday mornings were their standing coffee date before her session began. Except he'd been late. Again. And she'd left him a voicemail that was professional and polite and completely devoid of the warmth she used to reserve for him alone. So he'd come anyway, planning to wait until her lunch recess to apologize. Again, for being late, for always being late, for the 5 years of distance that had grown between them like a wall he didn't know how to scale. He was scrolling through emails on his phone, only half paying attention to the proceedings, when something made him look up. Some shift in the air, some change in the energy of the room that his subconscious registered before his conscious mind caught up. That's when he saw her. Bryony Kelton sat in the 3rd row of the gallery, wearing a navy blue cardigan that had seen better years and jeans that were clean but faded. Her dark auburn hair was pulled back in a low ponytail, and she had the kind of understated beauty that didn't demand attention but rewarded it when given. She was 30 now, though Thaddeus would have recognized her anywhere, in any crowd, under any circumstances. Some people left marks on your soul that time couldn't erase. But it wasn't Bryony who made his heart stop. It was the 3 boys sitting beside her. They were young, maybe 4 or 5 years old, with matching copper-colored hair that caught the fluorescent lighting. They sat quietly, far too quietly for children that age, with the stillness of kids who'd learned early that good behavior was a survival skill. Two of them shared a coloring book, working on opposite pages with silent cooperation. The third stared around the courtroom with wide eyes, taking in every detail with the focused intensity of someone cataloging everything for later examination. And all three of them had eyes, the exact shade of turquoise hazel that Thaddeus saw in the mirror every morning. The color wasn't just similar, it was identical. The same unusual combination of blue-green with gold flecks that people always commented on, that strangers asked about, that geneticists had once told him was a rare mutation occurring in less than 0.02% of the population. His father had it, his grandfather had it, and now three boys he'd never seen before in his life had it. The phone slipped from Thaddeus's hand, clattering against the tile floor. The sound echoed through the courtroom like a gunshot. Every head turned, including Cordelia's. Her eyes found him at the back of the room, standing frozen, and something flickered across her face. Surprise! Concern! And then something else. Something that looked almost like resignation. But Thaddeus wasn't looking at his mother anymore. He was looking at Bryony, who had gone absolutely white. Her head had snapped toward the noise, and now she was staring at him with an expression of pure terror. For a moment, they simply locked eyes across the crowded courtroom. 5 years of silence stretching between them like a chasm. Then she moved. "Stay here," Bryony whispered urgently to the boys, already gathering her purse. "Don't move." But the boy who'd been staring around the courtroom, the one with the intense observation skills, had already tracked the trajectory of her gaze. He looked from his mother to Thaddeus and back again, his small face creasing with confusion. "Mama, who is that man?" His voice was clear and carrying in the acoustically perfect courtroom. "Nobody, baby. We need to go." Bryony's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. "Court is still in session," the bailiff said automatically. "Please remain seated." Cordelia's gavel came down once, sharp and definitive. 15-minute recess. Her voice brooked no argument. She stood, her robes swirling around her as she descended from the bench, but her eyes never left Thaddeus. Bryony was already moving toward the exit, trying to shepherd 3 confused boys ahead of her. But the courtroom was crowded, and people were slow to clear the aisles, and Thaddeus was already pushing through the crowd toward her. Bryony. Her name came out of his mouth like a prayer and an accusation all at once. She didn't turn around, didn't slow down. Just kept moving toward the doors with single-minded determination, one hand on each of 2 boys, while the third followed close behind. "Mama, you're hurting my hand." One of the boys, the smallest, was struggling to keep up with her frantic pace. "I'm sorry, Kellen. I'm sorry, baby, but we need to go right now." Thaddeus reached them just as they made it to the hallway outside the courtroom. His hand shot out, catching the door before it could close. And suddenly, they were in the marble corridor with its soaring ceilings and its echo that made everything sound both louder and more distant at the same time. "Bryony, wait." He was breathing hard, though he'd only moved 20 feet. "Please, just wait." She turned then, positioning herself between him and the boys with the protective instinct of a mother bear. Up close, he could see the changes 5 years had etched into her face. Fine lines around her eyes, a permanent worry crease between her brows. The kind of exhaustion that came from carrying too much weight for too long. But she was still beautiful. Still the woman who'd once made him believe he could be better than he was. "You need to leave," she said, and her voice was steady even though her hands were shaking. "Right now, Thaddeus. Turn around and go back to whatever brought you here and pretend you didn't see us." "Are they mine?" The question came out raw, stripped of every polished word he'd learned in boardrooms and negotiations. The boys were watching now, all 3 of them. The observant one had moved to stand slightly in front of his brothers, and Thaddeus recognized the protective stance. He'd stood exactly the same way when he was young and scared and trying to seem braver than he felt. "I don't know what you're talking about." Bryony's chin lifted in defiance, but her eyes were filling with tears. "Don't." Thaddeus stepped closer, and she stepped back, maintaining the distance between them. "Don't lie to me. Not about this. Bryony, look at them. Look at their eyes. Lots of people have unusual eye colors. Not this color. You know they don't." His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "How old are they?" Bryony's composure was cracking. tears spilling over despite her obvious efforts to hold them back. It doesn't matter. How old? 5. They just turned 5 in August. The math was instant and devastating. 5 years old. Which meant Bryony had been pregnant when she left. When she'd walked out of his penthouse apartment with her suitcase and her broken heart and his engagement ring left on the kitchen counter like an accusation. You were pregnant. It wasn't a question. When you left, you were pregnant and you didn't tell me. Excuse me. Cordelia's voice cut through the moment like a blade. She'd followed them out, had been standing at the edge of the hallway, watching. Bryony, these are my grandchildren, aren't they? Bryony turned toward the judge, and something in her face shifted. There was history there, Thaddeus realized. His mother and Bryony had been close once, before everything fell apart. Your Honor, I have a case on the docket this morning. I really need to get the boys settled before it's called. You're here as a party? Cordelia's expression shifted into professional neutrality, but Thaddeus could see the wheels turning behind her eyes. Yes, ma'am. Child support enforcement case. I filed the petition 3 months ago. Against whom? Bryony's laugh was bitter. Against the man who knew I existed, at least. I wasn't going to chase a ghost. The words hit Thaddeus like a physical blow. She'd moved on. Found someone else. Had his children, but built a life with another man who'd apparently abandoned his responsibilities. Are you married? The question came out before he could stop it. Was. Widowed. 2 years ago. Bryony's voice was flat, emotionless, the way people sounded when they'd told a story so many times it had lost its power to hurt. Car accident. Jasper was a good man. He stepped up when someone else ran away. Jasper. The name felt like a brand against Thaddeus's chest. Some other man had raised his sons, had been there for first steps and first words and all the moments that Thaddeus had missed without even knowing they existed. One of the boys, the observant one, tugged on Bryony's sleeve. Mama, is this our other daddy? The question detonated in the hallway like a bomb. Bryony closed her eyes. When she opened them, they were swimming with tears. Crosby, baby, this is complicated. You said our other daddy went away before we were born. The boy, Crosby, continued with the relentless logic of a 5-year-old who'd been given pieces of a puzzle and was determined to make them fit. You said he didn't know about us. But Grandma Cordelia is standing right there, and you said she's a judge, which means she's important, and that man has eyes exactly like ours. So is he our other daddy or not? Thaddeus dropped to his knees, bringing himself to eye level with the boy. Up close, the resemblance was even more striking. Crosby had Bryony's delicate bone structure and her stubborn chin, but the eyes, the expression, even the way he stood with his weight slightly forward, ready to bolt or fight depending on what the situation required, all of it was pure Vern. What's your full name? Thaddeus asked, his voice gentle. The boy hesitated, looking to Bryony for permission. She nodded once, defeated. Crosby Alexander Kelton. That's Kellen James Kelton. He pointed to the smallest boy, the one with paint stains on his fingers and a dreamy expression. And that's Shepard Thomas Kelton. We're triplets, but we're not identical. Kellen's left-handed and he's the best at art. Shepard can run the fastest. And I'm the best at math. Triplets. Thaddeus felt the world tilt sideways. Not just one child, not even 2, 3 sons. 3 entire human beings who shared his DNA and had grown up without him. Those are very strong names, he managed to say. Do you know what they mean? Mama says names are important. This came from Kellen, the artist, who had edged closer despite Bryony's obvious tension. She says Crosby means from the village with crosses, and Kellen means powerful, and Shepard means sheep herder, but also someone who protects people who need help. Your mama is right. Names are very important. Thaddeus looked up at Bryony, who was watching the interaction with an expression he couldn't read. These are beautiful names for beautiful boys. Are you rich? Shepard, the runner, had apparently decided the situation was safe enough to satisfy his curiosity. You have a fancy suit, like the lawyers on Mama's TV shows. Despite everything, Thaddeus almost smiled. I have enough money, yes. Could you buy us a trampoline? We've been asking Mama forever, But she says trampolines are expensive and somebody always breaks an arm. Shepard Ellis Kelton. Bryony's voice was sharp. That is not appropriate. But you said our other daddy was rich. You said that's why he couldn't love us, because rich people only love money. Shepard's voice was matter-of-fact, reporting information without judgment. The words eviscerated Thaddeus. He looked up at Bryony, who had gone pale again, clearly never having imagined her children would repeat her private explanations to the man she'd been explaining away. I never said that, she whispered. I said he chose his work over everything else. I said he wasn't ready to be a father. That's the same thing, Crosby said logically. If he chose work over us, and work makes money, then he chose money over us. Cordelia cleared her throat, and everyone turned toward her. This conversation needs to happen somewhere less public. Bryony, what time is your case? 11:30. Then you have 90 minutes. My chambers. Now. All of you. It wasn't a request. Cordelia turned and walked back into the courtroom without waiting to see if they'd follow, leaving Thaddeus kneeling on the marble floor, staring at three boys who were his and not his, who carried his genetics but another man's last name, who were asking questions he had no idea how to answer. Bryony was the first to move. Boys, we're going to go with Judge Cordelia for a little while. I need you to be on your very best behavior, okay? Is that man coming too? Kellen asked. Yes, baby. He's coming too. Good. Kellen studied Thaddeus with the assessing gaze of an artist evaluating a subject. I want to draw his eyes. They're the same as ours, but older. I bet they have stories. Cordelia's chambers were nothing like the cold formality of the courtroom. Books lined every wall, legal texts mixed with poetry, collections, and novels. Photos covered her desk, pictures of Thaddeus at every age, from gap-toothed 7-year-old to his college graduation, to the Forbes magazine cover from 2 years ago that she'd framed despite his protests that it was tacky. Seeing his childhood self smile down from those frames, while his actual children stood uncertainly in the middle of the room, created a surreal cognitive dissonance that made Thaddeus feel like he was watching his life from outside his time. Body. Cordelia gestured to the small seating area in the corner, 2 couches facing each other across a coffee table scattered with legal pads and case files. Sit. Boys, there's a box of toys and books in the corner from when I do guardian ad litem interviews. You're welcome to look through them while the adults talk. Crosby, Kellen, and Shepard exchanged one of those wordless communications that twins and triplets seem to develop, then moved as a unit toward the toy box. But Thaddeus noticed they positioned themselves where they could still see Bryony, still monitor the situation. These were children who'd learned to be vigilant. Bryony sat on one couch, spine straight, hands clasped in her lap. Thaddeus took the other, leaving maximum space between them. Cordelia remained standing, a habit from years of presiding from an elevated bench. How long have you known? Thaddeus asked his mother first. How long have you known you had grandchildren and didn't tell me? Cordelia's expression was complicated. I suspected the moment Bryony walked into my courtroom 3 months ago with 3 boys who have your eyes. I confirmed it when I reviewed her child support petition and saw their birth dates. But Thaddeus, I couldn't tell you. Couldn't or wouldn't. Both. She moved to lean against her desk, arms crossed. Bryony filed her petition against her late husband's estate for back child support. I had no legal or ethical basis to reveal information about a party in a case before me. And even if the law had allowed it, I wouldn't have violated her privacy without her permission. They're my children. His voice cracked on the last word. Yes, and that's a conversation you two needed to have directly, not through me. Cordelia's gaze shifted to Bryony. Though I'll admit, I hoped you might tell him yourself once you knew your case had landed in my court. Bryony's laugh was hollow. Tell him what, exactly? That I ran across the country to escape his rejection, only to end up in his mother's courtroom 5 years later? That seemed like the universe's idea of a cruel joke. You never gave me a chance to reject anything, Thaddeus said, and couldn't keep the anger from his voice. You left, Bryony. You packed your bags and walked out, and when I tried to call, you'd changed your number. When I came to your apartment, you'd already moved out. You vanished. I left because you made it abundantly clear what your priorities were. Bryony's composure was cracking, emotion bleeding through. I left because I couldn't watch you choose your empire over us one more time. I was building something, building a future for us. No, Thaddeus. You were building a monument to your own ambition, and I was supposed to be grateful for whatever scraps of attention you had left over. Her voice rose, and the boys looked over from their corner, concern creasing their small faces. Bryony took a breath, visibly controlling herself. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, steadier. Do you remember the last conversation we had before I left? He remembered. Of course he remembered. He'd replayed it 1,000 times in the 5 years since, analyzing every word, every inflection, trying to figure out where he'd gone wrong. You wanted me to turn down the Singapore expansion, he said. You wanted me to stay in New York. I wanted you to come to my father's funeral. The words were quiet but devastating. I wanted you to be there when I buried the only parent I had left. But you were too busy negotiating a deal that your team could have handled. You sent flowers and a card and a promise you'd make it up to me when you got back. Do you even remember what you wrote in that card? Thaddeus's stomach turned to ice. Bryony, you wrote, I'm sorry I can't be there. This Singapore deal is the key to everything we've been working toward. Your father would understand that success requires sacrifice. I'll be home soon. Love, Thaddeus. She recited it from memory, each word precise and cutting. You told me my father would understand why you prioritized a business deal over his funeral. I didn't mean it that way. Didn't you? Because that's exactly how it sounded to me, standing alone at my father's grave, realizing that the man I loved would always choose his next big achievement over actually being present for the people in his life. Bryony wiped her eyes angrily. I came home from that funeral, and I took a pregnancy test, and it was positive. And I knew, Thaddeus. I knew that if I told you, you'd do the responsible thing. You'd marry me and hire nannies and show up for the important moments when your schedule allowed. And our children would grow up feeling like they were competing with your empire for their own father's attention. The accusation hung in the air between them. Thaddeus wanted to deny it, to defend himself, but the truth was lodged in his throat like a stone, because she was right. 5 years ago, he would have done exactly what she described. He would have convinced himself he was being a good father by providing financially while sacrificing presents for profit. So you just decided I didn't deserve to know. His voice came out raw. You made a choice for all of us without giving me any say. I made a choice to protect my children from growing up the way I did. Bryony's voice trembled but held firm. My father was a workaholic who loved me, but was never there. Every school play, every parent-teacher conference, every childhood milestone, he had an excuse why work came first. And my mother stayed, kept making excuses for him, kept telling me he loved me even though he couldn't show it. I watched her die inside a little more each year, waiting for scraps of affection from a man married to his career. She looked at Thaddeus with eyes full of old pain. I wasn't going to do that to my children. I wasn't going to become my mother, and I wasn't going to let you become my father. So yes, I made a choice. I chose to let you go pursue your empire without the burden of a family you weren't ready for. And you don't think I deserved a say in that choice? Thaddeus's voice was rising now too. You don't think I had a right to know I had children? To at least try to be better than you expected? I think you had 5 years to figure out that success, without people to share it with, is just expensive loneliness. Bryony stood abruptly, moving toward her sons. And I think this conversation is over. I have a court appearance in 40 minutes, and I need to get the boys settled. Sit down. Cordelia's voice cut through the tension like a gavel. Both of you, we're not done. Your Honor, with respect. I'm not speaking as a judge right now, Bryony. I'm speaking as a grandmother who just found out she has 3 grandchildren, and as a mother who watched her son make the same mistakes his father made before him. Cordelia's voice gentled slightly. Please, sit. Let's talk about this like adults instead of wounded children. Bryony hesitated, then sank back onto the couch. Thaddeus remained where he was, his whole body vibrating with emotion he didn't know how to process. Cordelia moved to sit between them, physically and metaphorically trying to bridge the divide. Bryony, you were right to protect your children. Thaddeus, 5 years ago, wasn't ready to be a father. He was too consumed with proving himself, without running his own insecurities, to be present for anyone else. "Mom," Thaddeus started, but Cordelia held up a hand. "Let me finish. You weren't ready then. But the question isn't who you were 5 years ago. The question is who you are now, and whether you're capable of being what those 3 boys need." She turned to face him fully. "So tell me, Thaddeus, are you? Because this isn't a business deal you can negotiate or a problem you can solve with money. This is about showing up, day after day, for soccer practices and homework and bedtime stories and all the ordinary moments that build a relationship. Can you do that?" Before Thaddeus could answer, a small voice piped up from the corner. "What's bedtime stories?" All 3 adults turned to find Kellen standing there, toy forgotten in his hands, watching them with curious eyes. "It's when a parent reads to you before bed, sweetheart," Cordelia said gently. "Mama tells us stories sometimes," Crosby offered, joining his brother. "But she makes them up because we can't always afford new books. She does all the voices and everything." The casual mention of not being able to afford books hit Thaddeus like a punch to the gut. These were his children, his sons, and they'd been struggling financially while he lived in a penthouse worth $8 million and bought companies the way other people bought coffee. "How did your other daddy do bedtime?" Shepard had joined his brothers, and now all 3 were standing there, watching the adults with the frank curiosity of children who decided the grown-up conversation was more interesting than toys. Bryony's face crumpled. "Daddy Jasper did bedtime every night he was home. He'd read 3 stories, 1 for each of you, and he'd do silly voices and make you laugh." "I miss Daddy Jasper," Kellen said quietly. "He was nice. I know, baby. I miss him too. But we never got to meet our other daddy," Crosby said, turning his analytical gaze on Thaddeus. "And now he's here. So does that mean he's going to stay? Or is he going to go away again?" The question was so direct, so painfully honest, that Thaddeus felt something crack open in his chest. These boys had already lost one father, they'd grown up without another, and now they were standing here, asking the fundamental question that would shape the rest of their lives. Was he going to stay? Or was he going to run? He thought about the Singapore deal he'd prioritized over Bryony's father's funeral. The deal that had indeed been key to his company's expansion, that had made him $100 million and opened doors across Asia. He thought about all the deals and acquisitions and late nights that had followed, each one building his empire higher while creating a life that was ultimately, exactly as Bryony had said, expensive loneliness. He thought about his penthouse where he ate dinner alone most nights. About the string of relationships that never went anywhere because no woman could compete with his first love, which was achievement. About the hollow feeling that had lived in his chest for 5 years, the sense that he'd traded something irreplaceable for something ultimately meaningless. And he looked at 3 boys with his eyes and Bryony's courage, who were waiting for an answer that would determine whether they'd risk hoping for a father or protect themselves against disappointment. Thaddeus slid off the couch and onto the floor, bringing himself to their level. "Can I tell you something honest?" All 3 nodded. "I didn't know you existed until about 30 minutes ago. Your mama is right that I wasn't ready to be a father 5 years ago. I was too focused on work, on building my company, on proving I could be successful." "Mama says everybody makes mistakes," Kellen offered. "She says what matters is if you learn from them. Your mama is very wise. And yes, I learned from my mistakes. But here's the hard part. I can't promise I'll be perfect. I don't know how to be a dad yet. I've never read bedtime stories, or helped with homework, or any of the things that Daddy Jasper did for you. So you're going to leave?" Crosby's voice was flat, already protecting himself against the disappointment. "No." The word came out with absolute certainty. "I'm going to learn. If your mama will let me, if you'll give me a chance, I want to learn how to be your dad, not your other dad, because Daddy Jasper will always be important. But maybe I could be another person who loves you and shows up for you and reads bedtime stories in silly voices." "Can you do silly voices?" Shepard asked skeptically. "I don't know. I've never tried. But I'm willing to learn if you'll teach me." The 3 boys looked at each other in that wordless communication again. Then Crosby, the spokesperson, turned back to Thaddeus. "We'll think about it," he said seriously, "and we'll let you know." It was the most honest answer Thaddeus had ever received, and somehow, it felt like more hope than he deserved. Bryony's case was called at 11:30, and Thaddeus sat in the back of the courtroom watching the woman he'd once planned to marry argue for child support from her dead husband's estate. The case was straightforward but painful. Jasper Chen had been a surgical resident when he married Bryony, with plans to become a pediatric surgeon. He'd adopted the triplets legally, giving them his name and his love and every promise of security. Then he died in a car accident on I-5, his car hydroplaning on rain-slicked roads while he was rushing home from a 36-hour shift at Seattle Children's Hospital. He'd left behind a pile of medical school debt, a small life insurance policy that had covered his funeral and 6 months of expenses, and 3 boys who'd lost the only father they'd known. The estate had been in probate for 2 years. Jasper's parents, who'd never approved of their son marrying a single mother of triplets, were contesting Bryony's claim for back child support, arguing that Jasper had provided adequately during his life and his death benefits should go to them, his blood relatives, rather than to children who weren't biologically his. Watching opposing counsel make that argument, watching them essentially claim that Crosby, Kellen, and Shepard were less deserving because they didn't share Jasper's DNA, made Thaddeus want to stand up and shout that those were his sons, his blood, and if anyone was going to provide for them, it should be him. But he sat silent, watching Bryony defend her children's rights with the fierce competence of a mother who'd learned to fight her own battles. Cordelia ruled from the bench with the precision of a surgeon, cutting through the legal arguments to the heart of the matter. Jasper Chen had legally adopted the children. He'd claimed them on his taxes, provided for them, loved them as his own. His parents' claim was denied. The estate would pay the requested child support, backdated to the date of his death. It was a victory, but a small one. Thaddeus did quick math in his head. The child support amount, even backdated, would barely cover a year of expenses for 3 growing boys, and the estate itself was modest. Jasper had been a good man who'd stepped up for children who needed a father, but he hadn't left them financially secure, which meant Bryony had been struggling, really struggling, and Thaddeus hadn't known. After the ruling, Cordelia recused herself from any further involvement, citing family conflict of interest. She scheduled a follow-up meeting in her chambers for the following week, this time wearing her grandmother hat instead of her judge robe. She'd said, the distinction was clear. This was no longer about law. This was about family. Thaddeus waited in the hallway while Bryony collected the boys from the courthouse childcare where they'd been waiting during her hearing. When she emerged with 3 tired, hungry children, he stepped forward before his courage could fail. Can I buy you all lunch? Bryony's expression was guarded. Thaddeus, please, just lunch. There's a place 2 blocks from here that has good burgers and a play area for kids. Let me feed my sons, just this once, just so I can start to understand their lives. She wanted to say no. He could see it in every line of her body. But 3 boys were looking up at her with hopeful eyes, and the truth was that good burgers were probably a luxury in their budget. Fine, lunch, but this doesn't mean anything, Thaddeus. This doesn't mean I'm letting you into their lives. I understand. The restaurant was called Cedar's Corner, a local place that prioritized quality ingredients and reasonable prices. The kind of neighborhood spot that people loved and corporations hadn't ruined yet. They got a booth near the play area, and the boys immediately asked permission to climb through the structure. Wash your hands first, Bryony said automatically, and stay where I can see you. Yes, Mama. 3 voices in unison, and then they were gone, racing toward the brightly colored tubes and slides. Thaddeus and Bryony sat across from each other in awkward silence, the weight of 5 years and too many unsaid things pressing down on them. They're beautiful, Thaddeus said finally. You did an incredible job raising them. We did an incredible job, Bryony corrected quietly. Jasper and I. He was there for everything I couldn't be because I was working 2 jobs to keep us fed. Tell me about him. She looked surprised. Why? Because he was their father. Because he did what I should have done. Because I want to understand the man who loved my sons. Bryony was quiet for a long moment, watching her boys through the window. When she spoke, her voice was soft with remembered love. Jasper was kind, patient. He had this way of explaining things that made even complicated medical concepts sound simple. He'd come home from 30-hour shifts exhausted, but he'd still get on the floor and play trains with the boys. He'd still read bedtime stories in silly voices. How did you meet? Hospital cafeteria. I was waitressing there, 3 months pregnant and showing, and I fainted during the lunch rush. Jasper caught me before I hit the floor, insisted on getting me checked out, and then asked if he could call sometime to make sure I was okay. She smiled, but it was bittersweet. I told him I was pregnant with triplets by a man who didn't want them, that I was broke and scared and not looking for romance, and he said that was fine. He wasn't looking for romance either. He was looking for someone genuine in a city full of people pretending to be something they weren't. He sounds like he was too good to be true. He was human. He worked too much, and sometimes he'd forget to call when he was going to be late, and he left his clothes on the floor like a teenager. But he showed up, Thaddeus. Every day, in all the ways that mattered, he showed up. The comparison was implicit but devastating. Jasper had been everything Thaddeus wasn't. Present, reliable, willing to prioritize people over ambition. I'm sorry you lost him, Thaddeus said, and meant it. I'm sorry my sons lost him. Our sons, Briony corrected. Jasper would be the first one to say they have 2 fathers. He never tried to replace you, Thaddeus. He just filled the space you left empty. The food arrived, and Briony called the boys back. They climbed into the booth, Crosby and Shepard on Thaddeus's side, Kellen staying close to his mother. They attacked their burgers with the single-minded focus of hungry children, and Thaddeus watched them, trying to catalog every detail. Crosby ate methodically, finishing one thing before starting another. Shepard ate fast, already thinking about getting back to playing. Kellen took tiny bites, more interested in talking than eating, telling a rambling story about something that happened at school that involved a hamster and a very surprised teacher. They were so alive, so present, so utterly, completely real. And they were his. Can I ask you something? Crosby directed the question at Thaddeus, his analytical gaze assessing. Anything. Why didn't you want us? The question hit like a bullet. Beside him, Thaddeus felt Shepard go still. Across the table, Briony's hand froze halfway to her water glass. Baby, that's not a fair question, she started, but Thaddeus held up a hand. No, it's a completely fair question. He turned to face Crosby fully. The truth is, I didn't know about you. Your mama left before she knew she was pregnant with you, and by the time she found out, we weren't talking anymore. So I didn't make a choice not to want you. I made a choice 5 years ago to prioritize my work over your mama. And that choice meant I never got the chance to know you existed. But if you had known, would you have wanted us? Shepard asked, his voice small. Thaddeus thought about the man he'd been 5 years ago. Driven, ambitious, convinced that success was measured in quarterly earnings and market share. Would that man have wanted 3 unplanned children? Would he have stepped up the way Jasper had? He could lie. Make it easy. Tell them what they wanted to hear. But something about 3 pairs of eyes exactly like his own demanded honesty. I don't know, he said quietly. The man I was 5 years ago wasn't ready to be a father. I was too focused on building my company, on proving I could be successful. I think I would have tried to do the right thing, but I don't know if I would have been good at it. I don't know if I would have been there the way Daddy Jasper was there. So why should we give you a chance now? Crosby asked, and there was no hostility in the question, just genuine curiosity. Because I learned something in the last 5 years. I learned that building an empire doesn't mean much if you have nobody to share it with. I learned that success without people you love is just expensive loneliness. And I learned that the biggest mistake of my life wasn't a business deal that went wrong or a investment that failed. It was letting your mama walk away without fighting for her. He looked across the table at Briony, whose eyes were bright with unshed tears. I can't get back the 5 years I missed. I can't undo the choices I made or be there for all the moments that already happened. But if you'll let me, I'd like to be there for all the moments that haven't happened yet. The boys were quiet, processing. Then Kellen, the artist, the dreamer, spoke up. Mama says second chances are important. She says everybody deserves a chance to be better than they were. Your mama is right about a lot of things, Thaddeus said. Okay. Shepard made the pronouncement like a judge delivering a verdict. You can have a second chance, but if you mess up, we're done. It was the most serious threat Thaddeus had ever received from a 5-year-old, and somehow it felt more important than any business negotiation he'd ever navigated. "That's fair," he said. "I'll try not to mess up." "Good. Can we get ice cream?" Shepard's attention had already moved on to more important matters. And just like that, Thaddeus Verne, billionaire tech mogul, master negotiator, Forbes cover story, had been given a second chance by 3 boys who owed him nothing and were offering him everything. The rest of the lunch passed in a blur of children's chatter and stolen glances at Bryony, who watched him interact with their sons with an expression he couldn't quite read. After ice cream, after the boys had extracted a promise that he'd come to Crosby's soccer game on Saturday, after Bryony had reluctantly given him her phone number so they could coordinate schedules, they stood outside the restaurant in the November drizzle, saying goodbye. "Thank you," Thaddeus said to Bryony, while the boys chased each other in circles on the sidewalk, "for giving me a chance I don't deserve." "I'm not doing this for you," she said quietly. "I'm doing this for them. They deserve to know their father, and they deserve to watch you either step up or fail on your own merits, not based on my anger or fear. I won't fail them. We'll see." She called the boys over. "Say goodbye to Thaddeus. We need to catch our bus home." Bus. They didn't even have a car. Thaddeus's jaw tightened, but he didn't comment. Didn't offer to buy them a car or call them a ride service or any of the other immediate solutions his money could provide. Because Bryony had made it clear this wasn't about money. This was about showing up. "I'll see you Saturday," he said to the boys. "What time is the game?" 10 in the morning, Crosby recited. "At Woodland Park, Field 3. Don't be late." "I won't be late. Everybody says that," Shepard said with the cynicism of a child who'd been disappointed before. "But they usually are." "I'll be there at 9:30, Thaddeus promised. "Early enough that you can't miss me." The boys seemed satisfied with this. They hugged their mother, then surprised him by each offering a quick, awkward hug before racing toward the bus stop. Bryony lingered for a moment longer. "Thaddeus, this thing with the boys, we're going to have to set boundaries, clear expectations. I can't have you sweeping in and out of their lives whenever it's convenient." "I understand. I'm serious. They've already lost one father. I won't let them lose another because you decide this is too hard or too time-consuming." "I'm not going anywhere," he said, and meant it with every fiber of his being. She studied his face, searching for something. "We'll see," she said again. Then she turned and walked away, following her sons toward a bus that would take them to whatever modest home they'd built without him. Thaddeus stood in the rain and watched them go, and for the first time in 5 years, he felt like his life might actually mean something beyond the numbers in his bank account. He pulled out his phone and called James, his executive assistant. "Cancel everything for the next 6 months, he said when James answered. "Sir?" "Everything. Singapore, Tokyo, the board meetings, the acquisition talks with the German firm. Delegate it, postpone it, or cancel it. I don't care. But clear my schedule. Mr. Verne, the Singapore deal alone is worth—" "I don't care what it's worth, James. I have something more important to do." There was a pause. Then, "May I ask what's more important than a $300 million deal?" Thaddeus watched the bus pull away, carrying 3 boys with his eyes toward a life he was determined to be part of. "Learning how to do bedtime stories in silly voices," he said, and hung up before James could respond. For the first time in his adult life, Thaddeus Verne was choosing family over empire. And it felt terrifying and right in equal measure. If you're hooked on this story and you want to see what happens next, drop a comment right now telling me what you think Thaddeus should do to prove himself. Should Bryony give him a real chance, or is she setting herself and her boys up for heartbreak? And while you're at it, hit that like button and subscribe, because part 2 is going to show you whether love and redemption can overcome 5 years of absence and broken trust. Don't go anywhere. The best part of this story is still to come. Saturday morning arrived with typical Seattle rain, the kind that wasn't quite heavy enough to cancel outdoor activities, but was definitely miserable enough to make everyone wish they could. Thaddeus stood at the edge of Field 3 at Woodland Park at 9:15, 15 minutes earlier than his promised 9:30, wearing jeans and a waterproof jacket he'd bought specifically for this occasion. He'd never owned casual rain gear before. His closet was full of $1,000 suits and designer shoes, but nothing appropriate for standing in the mud watching 5-year-olds chase a soccer ball. The field was already busy with parents setting up folding chairs and kids in matching jerseys warming up. Thaddeus scanned the crowd for familiar copper-colored hair and turquoise hazel eyes, his heart hammering against his ribs with nerves he'd never experienced before any business presentation. He spotted them near the home team bench. Crosby was already in his uniform, green jersey with the number 7, doing stretches that looked far too advanced for a kindergartner. Kellen and Shepard sat on a blanket nearby, Kellen drawing in a sketchbook while Shepard played with small action figures. And Bryony stood talking to another parent, her hair in a ponytail, wearing jeans and a raincoat that had seen better days. She looked beautiful. Tired and stressed, and beautiful. Thaddeus took a breath and walked over. Shepard saw him first. The boy's eyes went wide, and he jumped to his feet. "Mama! Mama!" He came. "The other daddy came, and he's early." Bryony turned, surprise flickering across her face before she controlled it. "So he is." Crosby jogged over from his stretches, his face carefully neutral. "You're early. I promised I would be. People break promises all the time," Crosby said, but there was a hint of relief in his voice that belied his skeptical words. "I'm learning not to be like those people." Thaddeus knelt down to Crosby's level. "Are you nervous about the game?" "No. I'm the second best player on the team. The best player is Mika, but she's sick today, so coach says I might get to play striker instead of midfield." The casual mention that the best player was a girl made Thaddeus smile. "That's exciting. What's the difference?" Crosby's eyes lit up, and for the next 10 minutes, Thaddeus received an incredibly detailed explanation of soccer positions, team strategy, and why it was important to pass the ball even when you wanted to score yourself. He listened with the same focus he'd once applied to quarterly earnings reports, asking questions, showing genuine interest, watching his son's face animate with passion. Kellen eventually wandered over, sketchbook in hand. "Do you want to see what I drew?" "Absolutely." The drawing was of the soccer field, rendered with surprising detail for a 5-year-old. Stick figures populated the scene. Players in green jerseys and opponents in blue, and in the corner, watching, was a figure with carefully colored turquoise hazel eyes. "Is that me?" Thaddeus asked, his throat tight. "I drew you watching Crosby play, because you said you'd be here, so I drew it happening." Kellen looked up at him with those eyes that were mirrors of his own. "Mama says if you imagine good things, sometimes they come true. Your mama is very wise. She's the wisest person in the whole world," Shepard declared, joining them. "She knows everything. Except how to fix the sink. She's not good at that. We have a bucket under it to catch the drips." Before Thaddeus could respond, a whistle blew, and coach called the team to huddle. Crosby jogged off, leaving Thaddeus standing with Bryony and the other 2 boys. "You really came early," Bryony said quietly. "I said I would. You also said you'd come home after Singapore 5 years ago. You said a lot of things, Thaddeus." The words stung, but they were fair. "I know. I'm trying to be different. To do better. We'll see," her standard response. The wall she kept between them. They moved to the sideline to watch the game. Thaddeus tried to set up the portable chair he'd bought, failed spectacularly at understanding the mechanism, and ended up sitting on the wet grass instead. Kellen plopped down next to him, still drawing, while Shepard provided running commentary on everything happening on the field, most of which had nothing to do with the actual game. "That bird is really big. Do you see that bird? I bet it's looking for worms. Worms come out when it rains. Did you know that? Mama told me. Mama knows everything about nature. She wanted to be a park ranger when she was little, but then she had to get a different job because park rangers don't make enough money to have 3 kids." Each casual revelation about their life, about Bryony's sacrificed dreams and their financial struggles, landed like a small knife to Thaddeus's heart. But he didn't comment, just listened, learning about the family he'd missed 5 years of knowing. The game started, and Crosby was indeed playing striker. He was good, fast, and strategic, with a competitive edge that reminded Thaddeus of himself. When Crosby scored the first goal, Thaddeus jumped to his feet without thinking, cheering louder than he'd ever cheered for anything in his life. Crosby's head whipped around at the sound, his face breaking into a huge grin when he saw Thaddeus celebrating. The boy pointed at him, then at the goal, as if to say, "Did you see that? Did you see what I did?" Thaddeus pointed back, giving him a thumbs up, and watched his son's smile grow even wider before he jogged back into position. "He's been talking about you all week," Briony said quietly, trying to pretend he doesn't care whether you show up, but checking the calendar every morning to count down the days. "I won't let him down," Thaddeus said. "You already did once, by not being here from the beginning." She wasn't being cruel, just stating a fact. The question is whether you'll do it again. Before he could respond, Kellen tugged on his sleeve. "Can you help me color this part? I can't decide if your jacket should be black or blue." Thaddeus looked down at the drawing, at the careful way Kellen had rendered him standing beside Briony, both of them watching the game, the boys playing. A family, complete. "Blue," he said, his voice rough. "Definitely blue." They spent the rest of the game like that, Thaddeus watching Crosby play while helping Kellen with his art, and listening to Shepard's endless stream of consciousness observations about birds and worms and the interesting cloud shapes, and how one of the dads on the other team had really shiny shoes. Crosby's team won 3-2. Crosby scored 2 of the 3 goals and was jubilant, running off the field to crash into Briony with muddy enthusiasm. "Did you see, Mama? Did you see both goals?" "I saw everything, baby. You were amazing." Then Crosby turned to Thaddeus, suddenly shy. "What did you think?" "I think you're the best striker I've ever seen," Thaddeus said honestly. "And I think your team is lucky to have you." The smile that broke across Crosby's face was worth more than every business deal Thaddeus had ever closed. After the game, after Crosby had changed out of his muddy uniform and the other families had packed up and left, Thaddeus found himself walking with Briony and the boys toward the parking lot. They were heading to the bus stop. He was heading to his car, but he couldn't quite bring himself to say goodbye yet. "Can I ask you something?" he said to Briony. "You can ask. Why do you ride the bus? I'm not judging, I'm genuinely asking. You work full-time, you got the settlement from Jasper's estate. Why not have a car?" Briony's jaw tightened. "Because a reliable car costs money I don't have. Because insurance and gas and maintenance add up. Because the settlement you're referring to will cover about 8 months of expenses if I'm very careful, and after that, I'm back to living paycheck to paycheck. Because this is what single parenthood looks like for most people, Thaddeus. We don't all have trust funds and stock options. I could help." "No. Briony, I have more money than I could spend in 10 lifetimes. Let me—" "No." Her voice was firm. "I told you. This isn't about your money. I don't want your guilt payments or your charity. If you want to be part of their lives, fine. Show up, be present, learn their favorite foods, and help with homework and come to soccer games. But I don't need you to rescue us financially. We've been managing fine without you. Have you, though?" The question came out sharper than he intended. "Because from where I'm standing, you're one emergency away from disaster. What happens if one of the boys gets sick? What happens if your car— oh wait, you don't have a car. What happens if you lose your job? Then I figure it out. The same way I've figured everything out for the past 5 years." Briony's eyes flashed. "You don't get to swoop in and play savior, Thaddeus. You don't get to throw money at problems and feel like you've done your part. That's not what they need." "Then what do they need?" "You. Actually you. Not your wallet, not your connections, not the fantasy version of a father who's rich and successful and can solve all their problems with a checkbook. They need someone who will show up on rainy Saturdays and not complain about the mud. Someone who will listen to Shepard's random observations and help Kellen color his drawings and watch Crosby play soccer like it's the most important thing in the world. Can you be that person?" Thaddeus looked at 3 boys who were watching this exchange with worried eyes, already learning to read adult tension, already bracing for disappointment. "Yes," he said, "I can be that person. Prove it." It wasn't a challenge. It was a plea. Prove that you're different. Prove that you've changed. Prove that you won't break their hearts the way you broke mine. "I will," Thaddeus promised. Briony studied his face for a long moment, then nodded once. "We'll see." The next 6 weeks became a masterclass in humility for Thaddeus Verne. He showed up for every soccer game, every practice, sitting in the rain and learning the names of Crosby's teammates and their parents. He attended Kellen's art class at the community center, watching his son create paintings that showed a sophistication beyond his years. He went to the playground with Shepard, who had endless energy and needed someone to race and climb and explore with. And slowly, so slowly, he began to learn who his sons actually were. Crosby was brilliant, analytical, with a mind that worked through problems like a chess master planning moves ahead. He was also deeply protective of his brothers, always making sure Kellen wasn't getting picked on for being sensitive and Shepard wasn't taking risks that might end in injury. He asked questions constantly, wanting to understand how things worked, why people made the choices they made, what the rules were, and whether they were fair. "Why do some people have a lot of money and other people don't?" Crosby asked one afternoon while they waited for Kellen's art class to end. They were sitting on a bench in the hallway, and Crosby was working on math problems that seemed far too advanced for kindergarten. "That's a complicated question," Thaddeus said carefully. "Mama says complicated questions are the most important ones to ask." "Your mama is right. The answer is that some people are born into families with money, and some aren't. Some people get opportunities that others don't. And sometimes people work very hard and still struggle, while other people get lucky and succeed. Which one are you?" "Both. I was born without money, worked very hard, and also got lucky. And we were born without money but with you as a dad, so does that make us lucky or unlucky?" The question was asked with pure curiosity, no malice, but it cut straight to Thaddeus's core. "What do you think?" Crosby considered this seriously. "I think we're lucky because Mama is the best mom ever, and we were lucky because Daddy Jasper loved us even though we weren't his real kids. And maybe we're lucky because you're trying to be better now, but we were unlucky that you weren't there before. That's a very fair assessment. Mama says fair is important. She says the world isn't always fair, but we should try to make it more fair when we can. How do you think we could make things more fair?" Crosby looked at him with those eyes that were unsettling mirrors of his own. "You could help other kids whose dads aren't there. You have lots of money. Mama says people with lots of money should help people who don't have enough." Out of the mouths of babes. Here was a 5-year-old articulating a moral philosophy that Thaddeus had spent 32 years failing to fully embrace. "That's a really good idea," Thaddeus said. "Would you help me figure out how to do that?" Crosby's face lit up. "Really? I could help?" "Absolutely. You're clearly the smartest person I know." From that conversation, an idea began to form. But Thaddeus pushed it to the back of his mind, focusing on the present, on learning to be what his sons needed right now. Kellen was the artist, the dreamer, the one who saw the world in colors and shapes and emotional textures. He was sensitive, easily hurt, but also incredibly empathetic. He noticed when people were sad and wanted to fix it. He gave away his toys to kids who looked lonely. He cried during movies and wasn't ashamed of it. "Is it okay for boys to cry?" he asked Thaddeus one day during art class. He was working on a painting of a sunset, and somehow he'd captured the melancholy beauty of endings in a way that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Absolutely," Thaddeus said. "Crying is how we process sadness. Everyone should be allowed to cry. Some of the kids at school say crying is for babies. Those kids are wrong. Some of the strongest people I know cry when they need to." "Do you cry?" Thaddeus thought about the night after he'd met his sons, how he'd gone back to his hotel room and sobbed for everything he'd missed, everything he'd lost through his own choices. "Yes, I cry." "What makes you cry?" "Sad things, beautiful things, thinking about mistakes I've made, hoping I can do better." Kellen nodded seriously, then added more purple to his painting. "This painting is about saying goodbye. I'm painting it for Daddy Jasper, so he knows we miss him but we're okay." The lump in Thaddeus's throat made it hard to speak. "That's beautiful, Kellen. He would love it. I'm going to paint one for you too, but it'll be about saying hello instead of goodbye, because you're new. I'd be honored." And Shepard. Shepard was pure kinetic energy, a bundle of curiosity and fearlessness that kept everyone on their toes. He wanted to climb everything, explore everything, understand everything through direct physical experience. He had no sense of danger, which meant someone always had to be watching to make sure he didn't break his neck, attempting something inadvisable. But he was also joyful in a way that was infectious. He found delight in small things, puddles to jump in, interesting rocks to collect, the way pigeons walked funny. He made friends everywhere he went, chatting with strangers, asking questions, assuming everyone was as fascinated by the world as he was. "Why don't you live with us?" Shepard asked one day at the park. He'd convinced Thaddeus to push him on the swings, and his questions came between requests for higher, higher, push me higher. "Because your mama and I aren't married," Thaddeus said. "Lots of people live together without being married. My friend Zoe's parents aren't married, and they all live in the same house." "That's true. But your mama and I are still figuring out how to be friends again. Were you friends before?" "We were more than friends. We were in love. But not anymore?" Thaddeus pushed the swing higher, watching Shepard's hair fly in the wind. "That's complicated. Grown-ups always say that when they don't know the answer." "Smart kid." "You're right. The truth is, I still love your mama very much, but love isn't always enough. Sometimes you hurt people you love, and they need time to decide if they can trust you again." "Did you say sorry?" "Yes, and she didn't forgive you. She's still deciding. Forgiveness takes time, especially when someone hurt you badly." Shepard thought about this while swinging. "Then, if you want her to forgive you, you should show her you're different. Mama always says actions are louder than words." "Actions are louder than words," Thaddeus repeated. "Your mama is very wise. I know she's the best." Through all of this, Bryony watched. She maintained careful distance, cordial but cool, allowing access but not intimacy. She was scrupulously fair about scheduling time, making sure Thaddeus got to see the boys regularly but never letting him overstep into decision-making that wasn't his to make. It was torture and privilege in equal measure. Torture because he watched her struggle with broken sinks and tight budgets and the exhaustion of solo parenting, and she wouldn't let him help. Privilege because he got to witness small moments of beauty. The way she kissed each boy goodnight in a specific order, Crosby, then Kellen, then Shepard, and told each one something she loved about them from that day. The way she made up songs while cooking dinner. The way she listened to their endless stories with genuine interest, no matter how tired she was. She was an extraordinary mother, and she was doing it all alone when she shouldn't have had to. The shift came on a Tuesday evening in December. Thaddeus had taken the boys to a movie, their first solo outing without Bryony present. She'd been nervous about it, he could tell, but Crosby had asked if Thaddeus could take them to see the new animated superhero film, and she'd agreed. They'd had a wonderful time. The boys had loaded up on popcorn and candy, sat in the very back row, and cheered during the action scenes. Afterward, they'd gotten pizza and talked about their favorite parts, debating character motivations and plot points with the seriousness of film critics. Thaddeus drove them home in the sensible SUV he'd bought specifically for this purpose, pulling up in front of the small house Bryony rented in the Wallingford neighborhood. It was a modest two-bedroom in a row of similar houses, with a tiny front yard and a porch that leaned slightly to one side. "Can you come in?" Shepard asked as they unbuckled. "Mama said she'd make hot chocolate when we got home. I should probably just drop you off." "Please?" Kellen added his voice. "Mama makes really good hot chocolate. She puts cinnamon in it." Thaddeus looked at the house, at the warm light glowing in the windows, and wanted nothing more than to go inside, to be part of that warmth. But he'd been so careful not to overstep, not to assume welcome he hadn't earned. "Let me ask your mama first." They trooped up to the front door, and Crosby opened it with his key, a responsibility he took very seriously. "Mama, we're home. Can Thaddeus come in for hot chocolate?" Bryony appeared from the kitchen, dish towel in hand. She looked tired, her hair escaping from its ponytail, a stain on her shirt that looked like tomato sauce, but she smiled at her sons. "Did you have fun?" A chorus of yeses, and then all three were talking over each other about the movie, the pizza, the way Thaddeus had perfectly replicated the main character's catchphrase. Okay, one at a time." Bryony laughed, and the sound made Thaddeus's chest ache. "Go wash your hands and get ready for hot chocolate. I'll talk to Thaddeus." The boys scattered, and suddenly it was just the two of them, standing in the small entryway of her home. This was the first time Thaddeus had been inside. She'd always met him outside for handoffs, maintaining that boundary. "You don't have to invite me in," he said quickly. "I can go. I promised them hot chocolate, and they clearly want you here. She gestured toward the living room. Come in, but take off your shoes. The floors are old and hard to clean. He removed his shoes, expensive Italian leather that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and followed her into a living room that was cramped and cluttered and full of life. Toys overflowed from baskets. Books were stacked on every surface. The furniture was mismatched and worn, but everything was clean. Everything was loved. Drawings covered the walls. Kellen's artwork displayed like a gallery show. A bookshelf held trophies and medals from Crosby's sports, photographs in frames, and a small shrine of sorts with a picture of a man who must have been Jasper. He was smiling in the photo, holding all three boys, and the love on his face was unmistakable. That's Jasper, Bryony said, following his gaze. The boys wanted his picture somewhere they could see it every day. He looks happy. He loved being a father. It came naturally to him in a way I always envied. You're an incredible mother, Bryony. She didn't respond, just headed toward the kitchen. Have a seat. Hot chocolate will be ready in a minute. Thaddeus sat on the couch, and immediately Shepard climbed into his lap, still chattering about the movie. Crosby sat beside him, leaning against his side with casual trust that made Thaddeus's breath catch. Kellen settled on the floor at his feet, already pulling out paper to draw a scene from the film. This was what he'd been missing. This casual intimacy, this assumption of belonging, the way children just folded you into their lives when they decided you were safe. Bryony returned with mugs of hot chocolate, and they sat together in the small living room, drinking cinnamon-spiced cocoa and listening to the boys recount the movie in elaborate detail. Bryony caught Thaddeus's eye once, and something passed between them. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But maybe the beginning of letting go. The beginning of allowing possibility. Mama, your phone's ringing, Crosby said, pointing to the kitchen. Bryony got up to answer it, and Thaddeus heard her voice shift immediately. What? When? Is he okay? The boys went quiet, sensing trouble. Bryony came back into the living room, her face pale. That was the hospital. My dad, he had a stroke. They're saying I need to come now. Your dad? Thaddeus stood up. I thought your dad passed away years ago. My biological father did. This is Hank, my stepdad. He's been in and out of the hospital for months, but they're saying this is bad. Her hands were shaking. I need to go. The hospital is across town, and the buses don't run frequently this late, and I need to call Mrs. Patterson next door to see if she can watch the boys, but she's got her own grandkids tonight, and I don't know. I'll stay with them, Thaddeus said immediately. What? I'll stay with the boys. You go to the hospital. I'll get them ready for bed, sleep on the couch, be here until you get back. Thaddeus, you don't know their routines. Then tell me. Quickly, tell me what they need, and I'll do it. Bryony looked at her sons, then at Thaddeus, then at the clock. She was running out of time, and they both knew it. Okay, she said finally. Okay, bedtime is 8:30. They need to brush their teeth, use the bathroom, put on pajamas. Crosby likes 2 stories. Kellen needs 3. And Shepard will try to negotiate for 5 but don't give in. Night lights on in both bedrooms, door cracked open. If Kellen has a nightmare, he'll come looking for me. So just talk to him quietly until he calms down. If Shepard can't sleep, he needs his weighted blanket from the closet. Crosby's fine, but he'll worry about me. So reassure him that everything's okay, even if you don't know if it is. She was talking fast, grabbing her purse, looking around for her keys. There's sandwich stuff in the fridge if they get hungry. Don't let them have more sugar. Emergency numbers are on the fridge. If anything happens, anything at all, you call me immediately. I've got this, Thaddeus said with more confidence than he felt. Go, be with your dad. Bryony hesitated at the door, looking back at her sons. Boys, I need you to be very good for Thaddeus, okay? Grandpa Hank is sick, and I need to go see him at the hospital. Is Grandpa going to die like Daddy Jasper died? Kellen's voice was small, frightened. I don't know, baby, but I need to be there. Can you be brave for me? 3 solemn nods. And then she was gone, the door closing behind her, leaving Thaddeus alone with 3 5-year-olds in a house he'd never been in before, responsible for bedtime routines he'd never done. For about 10 seconds, he panicked. Then Crosby appeared at his elbow. "It's okay. We can show you what to do. We're really good at bedtime." And so began the most challenging and rewarding evening of Thaddeus Verne's life. Bedtime, he discovered, was not a single event but a complex series of negotiations, rituals, and unexpected crises. Shepard didn't want to brush his teeth because his toothbrush was boring. Crosby informed him that Mama always let them have a small snack before bed. Actually, even though Thaddeus was pretty sure this was a creative interpretation of the rules. Kellen couldn't find his favorite pajamas and refused to wear any others until Thaddeus helped search the entire house and discovered them in the dryer. But eventually, miraculously, all three boys were in their beds, smelling of toothpaste and soap, looking up at him expectantly. "Stories," Shepard reminded him. "Don't forget stories." Thaddeus looked at the bookshelf in their room, overwhelmed by choices. "Which ones?" "We'll pick," Crosby said. And he did, selecting books that were clearly well-loved favorites, pages worn from repeated readings. Thaddeus read, and discovered that reading to children was nothing like reading quarterly reports or market analyses. It required voices, drama, the willingness to be silly. The boys corrected him when he didn't do the voices right, showed him how Mama did the bears grumbling or the mouses squeaking, and slowly, haltingly, Thaddeus found himself actually doing silly voices, making his sons laugh. Becoming not the billionaire CEO, but just a dad reading bedtime stories. When the stories were finished, when nightlights were on, and doors were cracked and final requests for water had been fulfilled, Thaddeus thought he was done. He sat down on the couch, exhausted in a way he'd never been from any business negotiation. Then Kellen appeared, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "I can't sleep. I'm worried about Grandpa Hank." Thaddeus patted the couch beside him. "Come here." Kellen climbed up, burrowing into Thaddeus's side. "Is Grandpa going to die?" "I don't know, buddy. Your mama will call when she knows more. I don't want more people to die. Daddy Jasper died, and it made Mama so sad. I don't want her to be sad again. I know, but you know what? Even if Grandpa Hank is very sick, your mama has you three. And you make her happy even when she's sad. You're the best thing in her life. Are you going to die?" The question was asked with the blunt fear of a child who'd learned too early that people leave. "Not for a very long time if I can help it." "Promise?" Thaddeus thought about all the promises he'd broken, all the ways he'd failed the people who'd trusted him. But looking down at this small boy with his eyes and Bryony's sensitive heart, he couldn't offer anything less than absolute commitment. "I promise. I'm not going anywhere." Kellen settled against him, seemingly satisfied. Within minutes, his breathing had evened out into sleep. Thaddeus sat there, afraid to move, afraid to disturb this small person who'd decided he was trustworthy. And he thought about what it meant to be a father. Not the financial provider he'd always assumed fatherhood was, but this being present in the scary moments. This offering comfort even when you didn't have answers. This being the stable place a child could lean on when the world felt uncertain. His phone buzzed. A text from Bryony. "He's stable. Going to be okay. Heading home soon. How are the boys?" Thaddeus looked down at Kellen asleep against his chest. Thought about the other two boys sleeping soundly in their room, about the evening of chaos and laughter and discovery that had just unfolded. He typed back one-handed. "We're good. Take your time. We've got this." And for the first time, he actually believed it. Bryony came home at 2 a.m. to find her house quiet and dark except for a single lamp in the living room. She closed the door softly, kicked off her shoes, and padded into the living room to find a sight that made her breath catch. Thaddeus was asleep on the couch with Kellen sprawled across his chest, the boy's rabbit tucked under one arm. They were both breathing deeply, peacefully. And the picture they made together, her son and his father, finally finding each other after 5 years apart, made her eyes sting with tears she was too tired to hold back. She should wake Thaddeus, send him home, maintain the boundaries she'd worked so hard to enforce. But watching them sleep, seeing the protective way Thaddeus's arm curved around Kellen even in sleep, something in her chest that had been frozen for 5 years began to crack. Instead of waking them, She got a blanket from the closet and draped it over both of them. Then she checked on Crosby and Shepard, both sleeping soundly in their beds, and allowed herself a moment to just breathe. Her dad was going to be okay. Her boys were safe. And for the first time since Jasper died, she'd had help when she needed it. She was sitting at the kitchen table, too wired to sleep, when Thaddeus appeared in the doorway. "Sorry," he said, his voice rough with sleep. "Kellen had a nightmare, and I didn't want to wake you by moving him." "It's fine. Thank you for staying. How's your dad?" "Stable. They caught it early enough. He'll need rehab, but the doctors think he'll recover most function." She rubbed her eyes. "I'm sorry I had to leave you alone with them on your first time doing bedtime. Don't apologize. I'm glad I could help." Thaddeus moved into the kitchen, keeping his distance but not leaving. They were great. Challenging, but great. Despite her exhaustion, Bryony smiled. "What happened?" "Well, Shepard tried to convince me that you always let them have ice cream before bed. Crosby lectured me on the proper way to fold pajamas. And Kellen insisted I read The Velveteen Rabbit 4 times because I wasn't doing the voices right the first 3 times. Bryony's laugh was unexpected and welcome. "That sounds about right. They love you so much," Thaddeus said quietly. Every other sentence was, "Mama says this," or "Mama does that." You're their whole world. They're mine too. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, the kitchen clock ticking, the house settling around them. "Thaddeus," Bryony said finally, "I owe you an apology." "For what?" "For not telling you about them. For making that choice alone." She took a shaky breath. "I was angry and hurt, and I convinced myself I was protecting them by keeping them from you. But the truth is, I was protecting myself. I was so scared of getting hurt again, of watching you choose your empire over us again, that I didn't even give you the chance to make a different choice." "Bryony, let me finish." She looked at him across the kitchen, this man who'd broken her heart and was slowly putting it back together piece by painful piece. "You deserve to know. They deserve to know you. And I took that away from all of you because I was too scared to trust that you might have changed, might have been able to grow into the father they needed." "You were right to be scared," Thaddeus said. "The man I was 5 years ago, I wasn't ready. I would have tried, but I would have failed them. You knew that. Your instincts were protecting them from exactly what you feared. Maybe, but you're not that man anymore." Her voice caught. "I've been watching you these past weeks. The way you show up early to every game. The way you listen to Shepard's random observations, like they're the most fascinating things you've ever heard. The way you spent 40 minutes helping Kellen get the exact shade of blue for a painting. You're becoming the father they need, and I've been so busy protecting myself that I haven't acknowledged that." Thaddeus crossed the kitchen slowly, sitting down at the table across from her. "I'm trying. God, I'm trying so hard, but I'm terrified I'm gonna mess it up, that I'll revert to type when things get difficult, that I'll let them down the way I let you down. The fact that you're terrified is actually a good sign. It means you understand the stakes." Bryony reached across the table, and after a moment's hesitation took his hand. "Thaddeus, I don't know if we can ever be what we were. Too much has happened, too much hurt on both sides, but maybe we can be something new. Co-parents who actually trust each other, friends who support each other, maybe even, eventually, people who can forgive the past and focus on building a better future for our sons." "I want that," Thaddeus said, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "I want whatever you're willing to give. But Bryony, I need you to know something." "What?" "I never stopped loving you, not for a single day in 5 years. Every woman I dated, I compared to you. Every success I achieved felt hollow because you weren't there to share it. You were the only real thing I ever had, and I threw it away because I was too stupid to realize that empire means nothing if you're building it alone." Bryony's eyes filled with tears. "Don't. I have to. You need to know. I'm not doing this just to be a father to the boys, though that's the most important thing. I'm doing this because I'm still in love with you, and I'm hoping that maybe, someday, if I can prove I've changed, if I can show you that you and the boys are my priority now, maybe you could love me again too. Thaddeus, I..." Before she could finish, Shepard appeared in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Mama, you're home. Is Grandpa okay?" The moment shattered, and Bryony pulled her hand away, turning her attention to her son. Grandpa's fine, baby. Come here. Shepard climbed into her lap, and Bryony held him close, burying her face in his copper-colored hair. But over his head, her eyes met Thaddeus's, and something passed between them. Not a resolution, not an answer to his confession, but an acknowledgement that the walls between them were starting to come down. I should go, Thaddeus said softly. Let you get some rest. Stay. The word came out before Bryony could stop it. It's late, and you're exhausted. The couch is actually pretty comfortable. Stay until morning, and we'll make pancakes for the boys. They'd love to wake up and find you still here. It wasn't a declaration of love. It wasn't even forgiveness. But it was an olive branch. An invitation into the small, ordinary moments that built a life. Okay, Thaddeus said. I'll stay. Winter deepened into spring, and Thaddeus's presence in their lives became as natural as breathing. He was there for school concerts and doctor's appointments. He showed up for the mundane moments, helping with homework, making dinner, folding endless loads of laundry. He'd moved to Seattle permanently, renting an apartment 10 minutes from Bryony's house, restructuring his entire business so he could work remotely and be present for his family. The boys had started calling him Dad instead of Thaddeus. The first time Crosby had done it, casually, while asking for help with math homework, Thaddeus had excused himself to the bathroom and cried. He and Bryony had settled into a partnership that was equal parts friendship and co-parenting, with an undercurrent of something neither was quite ready to name. They were careful with each other, respectful, kind, but there were moments. Stolen glances across dinner tables, hands touching accidentally while reaching for the same dish, that suggested the feelings between them were far from resolved. It was Cordelia who finally pushed things to a head. She'd become a regular presence in their lives too, embracing her role as grandmother with a fierceness that surprised everyone. She showed up for soccer games and art shows, took the boys to museums and parks, and slowly rebuilt her relationship with Thaddeus by watching him become the man she'd always hoped he could be. One Saturday in April, she invited Thaddeus to lunch, just the two of them, at her favorite restaurant near the courthouse. You're stalling, she said without preamble, once they'd ordered. Excuse me? With Bryony. You're stalling. You love her. She's clearly still in love with you, though she's too stubborn and scared to admit it. And you're both tiptoeing around each other like teenagers at a middle school dance. Mom, it's complicated. Everything worthwhile is complicated. That's not an excuse for cowardice. Thaddeus sighed. She's not ready. Have you asked her, or are you assuming based on your own fears? I told her I loved her. Back in December, she didn't say it back. Because you ambushed her in her kitchen at 2 a.m. when she was emotionally raw from her father's health crisis. Cordelia gave him the look that had made countless lawyers reconsider their arguments. That's not a declaration of love, Thaddeus. That's trauma dumping. Then what should I do? Show her. Actually show her what a life together could look like. Not as co-parents. Not as friends. As partners. As a family. What if she says no? What if asking for more ruins what we've built? Then at least you'll know, and you can move forward accordingly. But right now, you're both stuck in this limbo, and the boys can feel it. They're watching you two dance around each other, and they're learning that love means settling for less than you actually want. Is that the lesson you want to teach your sons? The words hit home, hard. That evening, Thaddeus showed up at Bryony's door with flowers, a reservation at a nice restaurant, and a pre-arranged babysitter in the form of his mother. What is this? Bryony asked, eyeing the bouquet suspiciously. This is me asking you on an actual date. A real date, not a co-parenting meeting disguised as dinner. Just you and me, talking about things that have nothing to do with the boys' schedules or who needs new shoes. Thaddeus, you can say no. I'll understand, but Bryony, I've spent 6 months showing you I can be a good father. Now I want to show you I can be a good partner too. Please, just give me one evening. She looked at the flowers, at him, at her mother-in-law, who wasn't quite her mother-in-law but might be someday standing in the doorway with a knowing smile. Okay, Bryony said finally. One date. The restaurant was nice but not ostentatious, the kind of place where you could have an actual conversation without shouting over loud music or feeling like every word was being overheard. They ordered wine and appetizers, and for the first few minutes, it was awkward, both of them hyper-aware that this was different from their usual interactions. Then Thaddeus asked about her work at the legal aid clinic where she'd started volunteering, and Brioni lit up, talking about the cases she was helping with, the families she was advocating for. And suddenly they were talking the way they used to, 5 years ago, when conversation flowed like water and hours passed like minutes. They talked about everything. Her dreams of going back to school for a law degree, his plans to start a foundation focused on supporting single parents, the boys and their individual quirks and talents, but also books they'd read, movies they wanted to see. The way Seattle rain felt different from New York rain. Somewhere between the main course and dessert, Thaddeus reached across the table and took her hand. "I need to say something, and I need you to actually hear me this time." Bryony's breath caught, but she nodded. "I love you. I have loved you since the day we met, and I will love you until the day I die. What I did 5 years ago, choosing work over you, over us, that was the biggest mistake of my life, and I have spent every day since trying to become worthy of a second chance I don't deserve. Thaddeus, let me finish. I know I hurt you. I know I gave you every reason not to trust me, but Bryony, I'm not asking you to forget the past or pretend it didn't happen. I'm asking you to look at who I am now, to see that I've changed, that I've learned, that I'm ready to put you and the boys first for the rest of my life if you'll let me." Tears were streaming down Bryony's face. "You want to know why I didn't say I loved you back in December? Why? Because I was terrified. Terrified that if I admitted I still loved you, I'd lose myself again. I'd become that girl who rearranged her whole life around your schedule, who made herself smaller so you could be bigger. I'd lose the strength I built in 5 years of doing it alone. I would never ask you to make yourself smaller. You wouldn't have to ask. That's what I did last time. I loved you so much that I disappeared into that love, and when you left, I didn't know who I was anymore." She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. "It took me 5 years to find myself again, to become strong and independent and capable of building a good life for my sons. And I'm afraid that loving you means losing that person I worked so hard to become." Thaddeus stood up from his side of the booth and slid in next to her, taking both her hands in his. "Bryony Kelton, listen to me. The woman you are now, strong and independent and fierce, that's the woman I fell in love with all over again. I don't want the girl you were 5 years ago. I want the woman you've become, the mother who fights for her children, the advocate who stands up for families who need help, the person who makes up bedtime stories and fixes broken sinks and builds a beautiful life out of nothing but determination and love." "I'm scared," she whispered. "Me too. I'm terrified I'll mess this up, that I'll revert to old patterns, that I'll let you down again, but I'd rather be terrified with you than safe and alone without you." "What are you asking me?" "I'm asking you to take a chance on us, to let me be not just the boy's father, but your partner, your equal, your teammate in this beautiful, messy, complicated life we're building. I'm asking you to marry me, Bryony. For real this time. Not because of obligation or timing, but because we choose each other, scars and all, and we want to build something together." Bryony stared at him, tears still falling, her heart visible in her eyes. "You're really asking me to marry you? In a booth at a restaurant over half-eaten pasta? I have a ring at home, a new one, nothing like the one from before, but I couldn't wait. I needed you to know right now, tonight, that I want forever with you. The boys, the chaos, the broken sinks and soccer games and art shows and all of it. I want all of it, with you." For a long moment, Bryony just looked at him. Thaddeus held his breath, watching her face, trying to read the answer before she spoke it. "Yes," she said finally. "Yes, I'll marry you. Because you're right. We're not the people we were 5 years ago. We're better, stronger, and maybe, together, we can be better than either of us could be alone." Thaddeus kissed her then, in a booth at a mid-range Italian restaurant, tasting her tears and her laughter and the promise of a future they'd both thought they'd lost forever. When they broke apart, both smiling, both crying, Bryony said, "But we're doing this right. Slow engagement. The boys need to adjust, and I want to finish my law degree first, and we need to figure out where we're going to live, because my house is too small, and your apartment is too modern, and—" He kissed her again, cutting off her planning spiral. We'll figure it out. Together. That's what partners do. They told the boys the next morning, all gathered in Bryony's small living room. Thaddeus had stayed over, sleeping on the couch, and they'd made pancakes together, falling into a rhythm that felt like a glimpse of their future. We have something we want to talk to you about, Bryony said once everyone was seated with full plates. 3 pairs of turquoise hazel eyes looked up with interest. You know how Dad and I have been spending a lot of time together? She continued. You mean dating? Crosby said matter-of-factly. We know you're dating. You went to dinner last night and Grandma Cordelia made us popcorn and let us stay up late watching movies. Right. Well, dating is when 2 people spend time together to see if they want to be together permanently. Like marriage? Kellen asked. Exactly like marriage. And Dad and I have decided that we want to get married. We want to be a family. All of us. Together. Silence. The boys looked at each other, having one of their wordless triplet conversations. Finally, Shepard spoke. Does that mean Dad's going to live here? Because the house is really small and we don't have an extra bedroom. We'll probably get a bigger house, Thaddeus said. One where everyone has their own room and there's space for everyone. Can we get a yard big enough for a trampoline? Shepard's priorities were clear. Definitely a yard big enough for a trampoline. And I could have more space for art supplies? Kellen asked hopefully. As much space for art supplies as you want. Crosby, as always, was the analytical one. But what if you guys get divorced like lots of people do? We'd have to move again. And we just started making friends at our school. The question was so painfully adult, so clearly informed by experience with loss and change. That's a really good question, Bryony said. And the truth is, we can't promise that won't happen. Life is uncertain and people change. But what we can promise is that even if Dad and I ever had problems, we would work really hard to fix them. And no matter what happened between us, we would both always be your parents. We would both always love you and be there for you. Like how you and Daddy Jasper loved each other but he still died? Kellen asked quietly. Yes, baby, like that. Love doesn't always mean forever, but the love we have for you 3 is forever, no matter what. Crosby considered this seriously. Okay, then I think you should get married. It's statistically better for children to have 2 parents in the home. I read that. You read that? Thaddeus tried not to smile. Where? In a book at the library about family structures. I like to be informed about things that affect my life. Of course you do. I think you should get married too, Kellen said. Because then we'd be a real family with a mom and a dad, like the families in books. We're already a real family, Bryony corrected gently. Families come in all shapes, but yes, we'd be a traditional family structure. I think you should get married because then Mama won't be sad anymore, Shepard said. She tries to hide it, but sometimes I hear her crying at night, and since Dad started coming around, she doesn't cry as much. Bryony's eyes filled with tears, and she pulled Shepard into a hug. Oh, baby, I'm not sad. I'm happy. Sometimes grown-ups cry when they're happy too. So you're happy about marrying Dad? Very happy. Good. Shepard looked satisfied. Can we go play now? This is a lot of talking about feelings. And just like that, the boys had processed the news and were ready to move on. They scattered to play, leaving Thaddeus and Bryony alone in the kitchen. That went well, Thaddeus said. Better than I expected, though I'm slightly concerned that Crosby is reading books about family structures for fun. He gets that from you. You were always reading research studies. They cleaned up breakfast together, moving around each other in the small kitchen with practiced ease. And Thaddeus thought about how this was what he'd been chasing all along, this sense of belonging, of being part of something bigger than himself. Not empire, not success, just this, family, home, love. 1 year later, Thaddeus stood in courtroom 4C of the King County Superior Courthouse, wearing a suit but without the usual tie, looking out at the gathered crowd. It was a small wedding, just family and close friends, but Cordelia had offered her courtroom for the ceremony, and it felt right to come full circle to the place where everything had changed. The boys stood beside him, miniature versions of him in matching suits, serving as his best men. They were 6 now, taller, more confident, and utterly convinced this wedding was happening primarily for their benefit. Is Mama here yet? Shepard stage whispered, bouncing on his toes. Almost, Cordelia said from her place at the front. She would be officiating, having gotten ordained specifically for this purpose. Be patient. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened, and Bryony appeared. She wore a simple cream-colored dress, her dark auburn hair loose around her shoulders, carrying a small bouquet of wildflowers. She'd finished her first year of law school with honors. She'd passed the bar exam on her first try. She was brilliant and strong and beautiful, and somehow, impossibly, she'd chosen to spend her life with him. She walked down the aisle alone, needing no one to give her away, claiming this choice as entirely her own. When she reached the front, when she took Thaddeus's hands, her smile was radiant. Cordelia cleared her throat, her judge's voice softened with grandmother's love. We are gathered here today to witness the marriage of Bryony Kelton and Thaddeus Verne. This is not a traditional journey to this moment. These two people have known heartbreak and separation. They've made mistakes and learned from them. They've built a family in unconventional ways, finding each other again after years apart. She looked at the boys, then back at the couple. But what makes a family isn't how it begins, it's how it endures. And these 5 people, they've proven that families are built through choice, through commitment, through showing up day after day, even when it's hard. The ceremony was short and sweet. They'd written their own vows, promises that acknowledged their past while looking toward their future. They have how. I promise to choose us over empire, Thaddeus said, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. To be present for the big moments and the small ones. To be a partner who supports your dreams while building our shared life. And to love you and our sons with everything I have, every day, for the rest of my life. I promise to trust you, Bryony said. To let you in even when I'm scared. To build a life where we're both whole, complete people who choose to be stronger together than apart. And to love you, flaws and all, through every challenge we face. When Cordelia pronounced them married, when Thaddeus kissed his wife while their sons cheered, the small crowd erupted in applause. The reception was held in Cordelia's backyard, under string lights and the unpredictable Seattle sky. There was cake and dancing and the boys performing a song they'd written about their family, which was off-key but heartfelt and made everyone cry. Late in the evening, when the boys were running around with the other children, Thaddeus pulled Bryony close. Happy? He asked, deliriously. You? More than I ever thought possible. He kissed her forehead. Thank you. For what? For giving me a second chance. For believing I could change. For loving me enough to risk getting hurt again. Thank you for proving I was right to take that risk. She looked over at their sons, laughing and playing and completely secure in the knowledge that they were loved. Thank you for becoming the man they needed, the man I needed. I'm still learning. We both are, but we're learning together. Crosby ran over, his suit jacket long since abandoned. Dad, Shepard says you promised him a trampoline. Did you actually promise that, or is he making it up? I definitely promised that. Good. Because we're holding you to it. Crosby's serious expression cracked into a smile. Also, this wedding is pretty fun. Can we do it again? I think once is enough, Bryony laughed. But we can have lots of other parties. Okay, can I have more cake? Yes, but if you throw up, you're cleaning it up yourself. Crosby ran off to join his brothers, and Thaddeus watched them go. These 3 miracles he'd done nothing to deserve but everything to earn. I love you, he told Bryony. I love you too. She leaned into him, and they swayed together to music from the speakers, surrounded by family and friends and the life they'd built from the ashes of old mistakes. It wasn't the story they'd planned 5 years ago. It was better. Because it was real, forged through pain and loss, and the courage to try again. Because they'd both grown into people worthy of the love they were claiming. And as the Seattle stars came out above them, as their sons' laughter echoed through the yard, as Cordelia watched her family with pride and joy, Thaddeus understood the truth he'd been chasing his whole life. Success wasn't measured in billions or board seats or magazine covers. Success was measured in moments exactly like this. In the woman in his arms and the boys running through the grass and the ordinary magic of being exactly where you belonged. He'd built an empire and found it empty. But he'd built a family and found it was everything. And that, finally, was enough. Thank you so much for staying with this story all the way to the end. If this journey moved you, if you felt every moment of pain and hope and redemption right alongside Thaddeus and Bryony, I need you to do something for me right now. Hit that subscribe button because stories like this, stories about real transformation, real love, and real second chances, that's what we're all about here at Cedar Drama. Drop a comment and tell me what moment hit you the hardest. Was it when Thaddeus first saw his sons? When Bryony finally let her walls down? When the boys accepted their father? I want to know what resonated with you. Because your stories, your experiences, they matter. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, someone who's struggling with forgiveness or second chances, or believing that people can truly change, share this video with them. Sometimes we all need reminded that it's never too late to become who we're meant to be. I'll see you in the next story, and trust me, you don't want to miss it. Until then, remember that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up day after day and choosing love even when it's hard, especially when it's hard.